Composting can be pretty tricky. If you do a lot of research on it, depending on who you talk to or what you read, they're going to probably tell you quite a few different things. A couple things that you have to be concerned about, things like the temperature of the pile. If it's too hot, you can burn off your nutrients. If it's not hot enough, you're not destroying, some of the weed seeds, or you're not going to be composting it quick enough. If you don't put the right ratio of greens and browns together, you can not get a good compost, not have a good nutrient level, and you have to not only put the right ratio in, but you got to put it in at nice even layers and have them be relatively chopped up. Other issues are dealing with rodents in your pile, or having to keep them covered to keep animals out from your edibles. And then also, having the right moisture level. In my opinion, it gets to be very, very complicated and overly complicated, in my opinion. Now, I've tried every type of composting you can imagine. One of the things I've tried here, and this is a 2-chamber composter. And some of the good things about it is that it's pretty easy to turn. So you have a handle here, and you can literally, with a few turns, you can aerify your pile. And that's another complication with composting. If you have too much air, you can lose your nitrogen levels, or you can lose some of your nutrients. Not enough air, and it doesn't compost as quickly. Now, like I said, the easy thing is this is really easy to turn. So the good thing about this is you can compost pretty quickly. So you can get your material in there and do that fairly rapidly. The bad thing is because it's up off the ground, you're not going to get a lot of your good soil microbes and your earthworms. You'd have to add them from up top. The other problem is the latches. These latches here, I've already had one break. And it's not like I open and close this that often, because to be honest with you, I don't really use it much anymore. But the latches, I think, are a little bit chintzy, especially for how expensive this thing is. That's another negative. It was pretty expensive. I think it was like $350. A positive is that you don't have to worry about rodents and stuff getting into your pile, because it's all pretty sealed. The other positive is it's difficult to put material in, because you got to lift it up and put it in. But to get material out, it's pretty simple, because you just roll the door down, and you put your wheelbarrow under, and you just roll it. You open it up and roll, and roll the roller, so all the material comes out. So it's actually pretty easy to get the material out, but a little bit more difficult to get it in. I really wonder why composting needs to be so complicated. To be honest with you, the truth of the matter is most things that you put in your compost pile are going to decompose in 1 year. Without you turning it, without you doing anything, you just put it in a pile and it will decompose and form a compost that you can spread out in 1 year. So if that's the case, then why do people even bother with all the turning and the special layers and all that good stuff? It's because they want to speed up the process, and then they want to have the right nutrient levels for their plants. So most things can go into your compost, and you're fine with just letting it be. Now, the only exception to that is your woody stuff, your paper, your wood, your pine needles, things like that. Now, that type of stuff tends to take a little bit longer to decompose. I would suggest having a separate pile for your wood products. Now, if you want, with the wood products, you can make a hugelkultur bed, which is a fantastic way to use your excess wood. If you don't have the space or not interested in doing something like that, you can burn it and use the wood ash. Now, you have to be careful, because if you use too much wood ash, it's not good for acid-loving plants like your rhododendrons and blueberries and azaleas. There is some calcium, and then there's some phosphorus and potassium that is valuable. You just probably don't want to spread very much of it. If you're going to use it, just use it sparingly and just have a very, very thin layer. Now, this is another way that I have composted in the past, and this is just a standard, basically 2-pile bin. And basically the way it works is you have one pile that you just keep basically piling stuff up in until it gets so full, and at some point you just kind of stop adding to it and you let it go. And then a year later, you have compost that's ready to go. So in And this one, you know, we have some, and these little slats come off, you know, so that way when you're ready to pull this stuff out, you can do that. Now, and then the other side is basically for the new compost. You just basically keep piling this one, you know, you just keep piling more and more stuff in here, letting it cook down. And then, you know, like I said, once this is ready to go out, after a year, you pull this out, and then you stop putting stuff in this one, and then you start putting new stuff in this one after that. So a pretty simple system. The good part about it is not super expensive. I mean, you could build one of these on your own, but you know, it does cost a little bit of money for the materials. The bad thing is it's kind of a pain. I mean, it's a pain to get stuff out. I mean, look at this. You gotta shovel all this compost out. I mean, it's just kind of a pain in the neck. So in order to get the right nutrient levels for your compost pile, you're gonna wanna understand the carbon to nitrogen ratios. Typically what you're gonna wanna have is a 25-to-1 ratio of carbon to nitrogen. Now, depending on what you put in your pile, that's going to determine what your carbon and nitrogen ratios are. So things like your chicken and rabbit manure, your hotter manures are going to be in the 6-to-1 range. Now, your you know, your cow manure and your horse manure is going to be more in the 12-to-1 range. Your springtime grass clippings are going to be in the 12-to-1 range, and your vegetable scraps are also in the 12-to-1 range. Now, in the 25-to-1 range, your summertime grass is a good one for your 25-to-1 range. Now, your leaves in the fall are going to be more like 50-to-1, and your like pine needles are going to be more like 100-to-1. So if you've got tons of leaves at 50-to-1 and you want to get a 25-to-1 ratio, mixing your leaves with chicken manure would help to get you closer to that 25-to-1 ratio. But you know, it's certainly not an exact science, not unless you're really, you know, measuring what you put in there, and I think that's probably too complicated. Now, this is the big pile system, you know, where you just basically make a huge pile and you just, you know, keep adding to it, and then you just turn it, and then at some point you let it go for a year, you let it cook, and then you know, then you take it out and spread it around in your garden. But the good thing about this is it's super cheap. You don't, all you need is some space for it. The bad thing is you know, you really, it makes it a lot easier if you've got some heavy equipment. So I use a tractor to move this around. So now that we know how to compost, I can tell you that I hate composting and I no longer do it. I'm a big fan of composting in place. A lot of permaculturalists and gardeners are now going to the Ruth Stout method, which is basically sheet mulching. So what I do now, one big input I have is grass clippings, and as opposed to taking my grass and weed clippings and dumping them in my compost pile, I'm just spreading them out very lightly in my garden. Now, grass clippings are hot, so you don't want to put them right on your plants, but you can put them around them, so long as they're not too close. You know, I'll put them, typically I'm going to have some fallow areas here and there in the garden that I can spread it out in, so it's usually not too much of an issue. And it ends up drying out in the course of just a few days, and this is like 3 days old, and it's already pretty dry. The other big input I have is chicken manure. Now, my vegetable scraps, anything that's edible goes to the chickens. Now, they'll eat it, and then they do a better job composting it than I would, and then I'll take their manure and I can spread that right in the garden too. Now, chicken manure is also hot, so you don't want it too close to your plants or touching it right off. And what I'll do is I'll rake some of the grass clippings back, spread out the chicken manure, and then cover up the chicken manure. That way I'm not, you know, losing too many nitrates. So so I would recommend that you think about how you're composting and thinking about whether or not it's possible to compost in place. Some things to think about, for example, is maybe putting a deciduous tree downwind from your garden. So then, you know, you can let the leaves come down and blow into your garden. So you've already got your mulch and compost for the next season. Anyways, I think that composting in place is really the answer for me, and it is a much more efficient way of composting.